Hello, welcome to DooDah Dave's Records. So this is our inaugural version of DooDah Dave's, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about DooDah Dave. So DooDah Dave is my Instagram website, DooDah Dave 57, and the DooDah Man comes from the Grateful Dead's Truckin' from 1970s American Beauty, and the DooDah Man once told me, got to play your hand, sometimes the cards ain't worth a dime if you don't lay them down, as the verse as it goes. The DooDah Man was a barker or a announcer at the racetrack to get people to bet more on the horses. Not very experienced at horse tracks, and as people know, I don't bet much. I wanted to start this channel to give back a little bit. I love music, I love records, I love concerts, I love playing music, listening to music, collecting music, all of that. And maybe do a couple of record reviews. And we might get into other things, books, movies, TV shows of interest, things like that. Yeah, I jotted down a couple of notes on my inaugural voyage here. So we're here in Beggar's Tomb. Also a Grateful Dead reference. I hear a lot about the Grateful Dead on this channel if you listen. I live in a silver mine and they call it Beggar's Tomb, so I thought that was a good name for my man cave. In my youth I did freeform radio, so I might talk about books, I might talk about movies, I might talk about TV shows of interest, past, present, maybe even future. And I might play a little music. I do play guitar. I might have some originals. I might have guests, you never know. Wrote down a couple of notes for myself. I am 65 years old. I am married with 2 kids, and now with 1 grandkid. Hey, Phoenix, saying hi to you out there. My daughter Sherry lives out in California, and my son Dylan is here in Westchester, going to school in Manhattanville, majoring in theater, and my wife is a jewelry designer with Origami Owl. So that's a little bit about me, just so you know me. I am 65 years old, I am married, and I broadcast from a basement down by the river. All right. Little background before I get into the review. We're going to do start from the back of the alphabet rather than the front. I do things sometimes differently. My earliest foray into music was in the orchestra at my school, at my grade school. 4th grade, I started playing clarinet and in the school orchestra, and I did pretty well. And by the 8th grade, I was promoted from the 2nd clarinet to 1st clarinet to the head of the woodwind section. And by the 8th grade, 4 years later, I had won the orchestra prize, so I was pretty proud of that. The first record I ever bought was a 45 of the Beatles. One side had P.S. I Love You on it, the other side had Love Me Do. So we'll talk a lot about the Beatles. I'm a big Beatles fan. Let's see, I've got my yellow submarine over here. Okay. And one of the first records I remember buying, long players, 33 1/3, full albums as we call them, vinyl records, was Jefferson Airplane Surrealistic Pillow. I remember that. I also remember Between the Buttons by the Rolling Stones. I started to collect some cassettes in the late 60s also, but I don't have those anymore. And a lot of the pre-recorded cassettes weren't very good, so the albums have withstood better. I'll tell you, I collect records and I also collect CDs. I gave my cassettes up. So I have records, I have CDs, and then whatever you get from Apple Music, which I subscribe to also. My first concert that I remember was Canned Heat on the Upper West Side on the summer of '69. It was the lead up into Woodstock, and I looked at set lists. I can't for the life of me find that set list, but I remember seeing them there. And then that same year, that was probably July, August, like I say, before Woodstock. And then in September of '69, I got to see Zeppelin at the Garden. It was an early show. Back then, the Garden, they did early shows and late shows. like they did later at the Fillmore East and Academy of Music, where I saw a lot of I didn't see any at the Fillmore East, but I saw a lot at the Academy of Music, which was later the Palladium. All right, so that's enough about me, a little intro. So today's record is by the great and late Warren Zevon. A little burn there from my ring light. Oh, I'm working out my tech here. So Warren was a very, very talented guy. Singer, songwriter, contemporary of the Eagles, which we'll talk about in a minute. Jackson Browne. This was his third album, Excitable Boy, and it's the one that had the big hit, Werewolves of London, of course. And it's a really great album. I'm listening to it all week, prepping for this. Came out in 1978. It was his third album. The first album, he was kind of a throwaway. He produced it himself. It didn't do well. The second album, Jackson produced and had Hasten Down the Wind and Carmelita. Great song. But this had Werewolves. Now, does anybody know who the rhythm section on Werewolves? Well, let me just mention that he plays with a lot of great LA, where he was based, studio musicians. Many of them played with Linda Ronstadt, James Taylor, Bonnie Raitt, that whole crew, Jackson. But does anybody know who the rhythm section is on the recorded version, the studio version? One more thing about the Excitable Boy album. It was recorded at Sound City, which was very, very famous for albums by Nirvana, Tom Petty, Buckingham and Nicks, and then Fleetwood Mac. So many, many people recorded at Sound City, and many others as well. So, and it says thanks to Joe Smith. Of course, he was the big A&R record guy at Warner Brothers. They gave the Grateful Dead a start. Interesting. The Dead would later cover Werewolves of London, and they have his thanks to Joe Smith on here. So anyway, getting back to Werewolves of London, third cut on the first side. Fourth cut after Excitable Boy. So the rhythm section is none other than John McVie and Mick Fleetwood of Fleetwood Mac. So I think that's kind of cool. Guitars, Waddy Wachtel on almost all of the songs on the album. Danny Cooch plays guitar, Nighttime in the Switching Yard. That's kind of a funk-based thing on the second side. It's just a great album. I highly, highly recommend collecting it or getting a copy of it, however you listen to it. And there's a lot of other notable people. Produced by Jackson Browne and Waddy Wachtel. And recorded at the... Did I say Sound City? I meant it was recorded at the Sound Factory. So not Sound City. I got that wrong. I'm going to it's my inaugural voyage. I'm going to be learning things along with you, and I'm probably make some mistakes. It happens. So let's go down some of the musicians, because this is kind of fun, at least fun for me. Leland Sklar, who, by the way, has a great YouTube channel. He has really interesting stories. He did a whole thing on David Crosby I listened to the other day, which is great. And Leland's played with everybody. JT, Cross, obviously Zevon, Jackson Browne, and just about everybody else, Bonnie Raitt. Russ Kunkel, also from, they used to be called The Section, Leland Sklar, Russell Kunkel, and Danny Korch on guitar. I saw them back up JT. I'll talk about some concerts I've been to. That was a really excellent James Taylor concert at Carnegie Hall. He did 3 encores. David Crosby and Graham Nash came out for I believe the second encore, and the third encore, Carole King came out and did You've Got a Friend to close it up. So what else? Waddy Wachtel, Bob Glaub on bass, Russell Kunkel again, Jim Horn on saxophone on Excitable Boy. Jim Horn played with the Rolling Stones, with Bobby Price, their horn section for many, many years through the XL on Main Street and later. And then Excitable Boy, Linda Ronstadt and Jennifer Warnes doing the harmonies. So really, really great people. Carla Bonoff doing harmonies on Accidentally Like a Martyr. Great, great song. Very tortured love song. Warren could do kind of shockers, and then he could do really like great torchy songs like Accidental Like a Martyr and Carmelita and Hasten Down the Wind, the ballads. Could really stretch it out. Who else is on here? It's got a bunch. Jorge Calderon is longtime collaborator. He was on The Wind, the last album he did. Well, it's Rick Murata on drums, great LA session drummer. And Jeff Porcaro, who was in Toto with his brother and also played with Bob Weir. So there's, it's an all-star A-list musical cast here. It doesn't get, much better than that. And he brings it on this album with the songs, the performances, the instrumentation, the recording. So let's talk a little about the album. Here's Warren on the front, there's a picture of Warren on the back, and you open up the inside of it, and originally the record was in a sleeve, and the sleeve had a picture of Warren's 44 Magnum. Now, I found out, doing a little research on this, something I did not know, that Warren Zevon was the son of a Russian gangster. Rather interesting. Don't know much more about that, but when you look at the topic matter of many of his songs, Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, Frank and Jesse James, Excitable Boy, he kills the girl and rapes her and puts her bones in a cage. You see that his propensity for violence obviously came from something that and then Werewolves of London about a vampire, but his propensity for an attraction to and his depiction of violence in a comical and ironic vein was a way for him probably to work out some of his stuff from his childhood and growing up, where he came from. A lot of history, he talks about the CIA decided they want Roland dead. He talks about Woodrow Wilson's guns. I heard them in the harbor. So he's a great student of history and world politics, and kind of the underworld of world politics, and also Hollywood. I saw Lon Chaney walking with the Queen. I saw Lon Chaney Jr. walking with the Queen, doing the Werewolves of London, Trader Vic's. His hair was perfect. He makes fun of the vanity of Hollywood. Last night was the Oscars, which was interesting, and a little bit of a disaster to some of us. A little disappointing. I won't go into all of that. Keep it on the music right now, but Warren had a way to pump up the volume, pump up the jams a little bit, on the music business and Hollywood and Tinseltown, where he was based and spent a lot of time. And Warren, very tragically, had inoperable lung cancer, died in the early 90s, I believe 94, I think. Couldn't find any tours after 93, so I think he died at 94. There's an excellent documentary about him. I think it's called Inside Out. Just a very, very interesting guy. Fantastic songwriter. Somebody that Bob Dylan looks up to, which is really saying a lot. And one of my faves, and I said, been covered by the Dead. So that's where we are with Warren Zevon and Excitable Boy, his third album. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we'll... I guess I have to do Y, and there's only one band that I can think of. Well, I can think of a lot of bands that begin with a Y. Yellow Jackets, Young Bloods. But there's another band with a Y that I will probably feature one of their albums, and so we'll talk then. And it was really nice spending time with you. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you at DooDah Dave's Records. See you on the digital platform. Have a good night.